With pre-season testing kicking off in Bahrain on February the 23rd, Formula 1 teams are working frantically on their cars ahead of the new season. All share the same objective, to make the car as quick as possible, but as this is the second year of Formula 1's new ground effect regulations, everyone has a slightly different set of priorities. So based on the strengths and weaknesses demonstrated last year, what are those objectives? The areas where the biggest gains can be made to allow each team to do better than they did in 2022. In this video, we will take a look at the 10 teams in reverse Constructors' Championship order to lay out the priorities for their new car designs. Given it had comfortably the worst car of 2022, Williams obviously needs big downforce gains. But it's not that simple, as what it really needs is not just to pile on the downforce, but do so in a way that doesn't come at a big cost in terms of aerodynamic sensitivity. As Williams head of vehicle performance Dave Robson points out, there's always a trade-off in terms of downforce and sensitivity. But when the team added downforce to the car with its major mid-season upgrade and side pod last year, it came at too big a cost. It made the car more wind and pitch sensitive. This has also been a problem for Williams in previous years. A peaky car makes it more difficult to achieve a good balance, which hurts driver confidence and is indicative of a shortfall in aero understanding. This is the team's major limitation. AlphaTauri produced a solid base car last season, but while reliability problems and operational mistakes resulted in it only finishing 9th despite having the 7th fastest car, there was a bigger problem. This was the combination of the stuttering introduction of upgrades and the inconsistent aerodynamic gains being made. In 2023, AlphaTauri plans what it calls more of a rolling upgrade strategy, which is also dependent on making more consistent aerodynamic gains in the wind tunnel, so there are parts worth producing. AlphaTauri has identified some areas where it can make changes to unlock more avenues for aero gains, for example moving the front suspension a little further forward. Such changes could help it to find more consistent improvements. The Haas VF22 had one very obvious weakness, one laid bare by the fact Baku and Monza were its two worst tracks. The car simply had too much drag, meaning it struggled at circuits with long straights. There were various reasons for this. Haas limited the number of upgrades it introduced, so didn't produce a big range of rear wing options, and, as technical director Simone Resta told The Race, it focused on a car that worked well at the majority of higher downforce tracks. He also said tackling its drag problem is a target for 2023. But it wasn't only about the available wing levels and downforce targets. Team principal Gunther Steiner also pointed to some baked-in characteristics impacting the drag that could only be fixed with the introduction of a new car in 2023. Therefore, Haas can and must have a car that is a more efficient compromise in terms of its downforce and drag levels. In 2022, Aston Martin got its car concept fundamentally wrong. This led to it not introducing what could be called its proper car until the 6th event of the season in Spain, which was characterised by the team as even more underdeveloped than a launch spec car. There were limited resources to upgrade it, although Aston Martin showed it was an improvement by becoming more competitive as the season progressed, and only missed out on beating Alfa Romeo to 6 in the championship on countback. Its early season problems with porpoising were blamed on being misled by its various simulation tools. These have been improved as a result, so what Aston Martin needs in its car this season is one that correlates well with those when it runs in the real world to prove the team is on the right track. The area where Alfa Romeo can make the most gains is largely invisible, but one that has the potential to impact the competitiveness of the car throughout the season. Last year it started the campaign strongly, but slid back in competitiveness, until that is late season floor and front wing upgrades as part of a wider package turned it back into a Q3 contender. But the team blames the lull in performance not on the fact it wasn't making aerodynamic gains in the wind tunnel, but because of a disadvantage in production turnaround times. That's led to the team prioritising recruiting more production personnel. As lead driver Valtteri Bottas has said, if Alfa Romeo could again start the season strongly, this improved manufacturing capability will make it easier to keep up with its rivals. McLaren's 2022 campaign was a little disappointing, despite the fact it was still firmly in the fight at the front of the midfield. This was thanks to a car that wasn't easy to drive, lacking in corner entry stability and prone to mid-corner understeer. Lando Norris did a superb job to adapt his style to mitigate those problems, but teammate Daniel Ricciardo struggled throughout the season. And despite his departure, McLaren needs a less peaky car. The problems appear to lie in two areas, both the aerodynamic design and the characteristics of the Pirelli tyres that McLaren struggled to get the best out of. As new team principal Andrea Stella explained at the end of 2022, McLaren needs to find ways with its car design to mitigate the fact the tyres are very sharp on initial turn-in, but then give up grip as lock is added. As Fernando Alonso never tired of pointing out, Alpine had serious reliability problems last year. Although the team only posted 8 retirements, putting it mid-table for DNFs, there were too many occasions when problems compromised its weekend and practice and qualifying, and sometimes even when the car got to the finish, for example in Canada, where Alonso lost a top 5 result because of a loss of power but still finished in the top 10. The power unit is the obvious focus for this given how many problems the Renault engine caused. Bruno Famin, executive director of the engine base in Viry-Châtillon in France, says many of the problems were related to auxiliary parts. That includes the water pump that first caused problems when it put Alonso out of the race in Saudi Arabia. Given Alpine made significant performance gains last year, if it can make the power unit package reliable, that bodes well for the team's potential. Given the troubles it had with porpoising and bouncing last year, Mercedes has an obvious priority this year. It needs to prove it has hit on the right concept and therefore that it has fully understood its 2022 problems. Mercedes cannot afford another season of troubleshooting. That means it needs to get its ideas right in terms of the available suspension travel, sidepod configuration and, crucially, the whole underfloor aero to allow it to be back in championship contention. As team boss Toto Wolff has said, Mercedes needs to run faster to catch the opposition, so desperately needs a strong starting car. Mercedes has been through plenty of soul-searching and analysis to improve its design tools to avoid a repeat of the problem. The 2023 car needs to confirm this process has been successful. Ferrari had a quick car last year, on average the fastest car, as proved by the fact it racked up 12 pole positions. But its priority this year is for a car that is more competitive on race stints and that is also used better strategically and operationally given it only managed 4 wins in 2022. In terms of that race performance, there are 2 obvious areas for gain. The first is on the power unit reliability side, given after failures early in the year, it was running the most powerful engine package in F1 a little below its best. Reliability fixes should have solved that problem, which will pay off particularly on Sundays. Ex-team principal Mattia Binotto set reliability as the top priority, which has been a focus since the first half of last year. But a more balanced performance across qualifying and the race is what he isolated as key to being able to emerge as a serious title threat, even if he won't be there to oversee it. Red Bull is the one team that doesn't have an obvious weakness to tackle in 2023, save for the ongoing battle to reduce weight. But it does have a significant external challenge to face. As a result of breaching the cost cap in 2021, Red Bull has its wind tunnel runs and CFD items reduced for a 12-month period that started late last year. It already has the least thanks to F1's aerodynamic testing regulations, or ATR as it's known, but lost an additional 10% of the theoretical maximum allocation as a punishment. Regardless of whether you think that's enough, it will have an impact. As former Red Bull aerohead Dan Fallows, now at Aston Martin, says, the restriction Red Bull faces is not insubstantial. This is a test of Red Bull's efficiency and the way it balances up in-season development with work on its 2024 car. Therefore, how Red Bull deals with its ATR disadvantage will shape both this season and the next.